Well, that certainly didn't last long. Not even one full week after publicly posting Reject AI, Marcus Notch Person, the original creator of Minecraft, has announced that he might give vibe coding a shot. Yes, really. Apparently, all that extremely confident anti-AI rhetoric became a little less important once he needed to get some work done and discovered that talented programmers were not exactly lining up outside his door. For context, Notch is currently developing Levers and Chests, a retro-style first-person dungeon crawler with roguelike elements. He originally described the project back in 2024 as something he was working on largely by himself, and his current X profile still identifies it as his active project. In his new post, Notch said, "I just might give vibe coding a shot." He then explained, "Not because I don't like to do programming, but because I've been having a lot of trouble hiring talented programmers, and I'll probably feel less bad about firing a chatbot." He went on to say that AI could potentially create some of the dull development tools he needs, such as a map editor or a node graph visualizer. He also suggested using it to bounce around more unusual design ideas, including questions about the simplest possible ternary logic gate. And then, almost as if he already knew exactly what everyone was going to say, he asked, "What options should I look into?" He concluded with a joke asking for restaurant recommendations from places that serve crow. "Oh, don't worry, Notch. I'm sure the internet will be more than happy to help you find a suitable recipe." The schadenfreude has to be delicious. Earlier this year, Notch was being reported as one of the loudest prominent critics of AI-assisted programming. In February, Fortune reported on comments in which he characterized people promoting AI coding in extremely harsh terms, arguing that aspiring programmers should learn the fundamentals instead of relying on generated code. That criticism was already more complicated than the slogan made it sound. There is a perfectly reasonable argument that beginners should understand programming fundamentals. You need to recognize bad logic, security problems, performance issues, and hallucinated APIs. An AI assistant cannot magically replace judgment. But there is an enormous difference between saying, "Learn what the code does," and declaring that the entire technology should be rejected. And now, less than a week after posting Reject AI, he is asking AI programmers which tools they recommend. How interesting. Feelings aside, I am genuinely happy that someone as prolific and historically important as Notch is finally giving AI-assisted development a chance. I do not say that because I think he should hand his entire game to a chatbot, close his eyes and upload whatever comes out. That would be ridiculous. I say it because this is exactly the sort of situation where these tools can be useful. Notch is an experienced programmer and game designer. He understands systems. He knows how games are constructed, and he knows enough to examine the output rather than blindly trusting it. AI-assisted programming does not necessarily remove the programmer from the process. It changes where that programmer spends their time. Research into vibe coding describes it as an iterative workflow. The developer gives instructions, reviews what the model produces, tests it, identifies problems, and either manually edits the code or asks the model to revise it. Programming expertise remains important because the human still has to manage the project's context, evaluate the generated code, and decide when the AI is no longer the appropriate tool. That sounds almost perfectly suited to the tasks Notch described. A map editor is important, but making one can be slow and tedious. The same goes for node graph interfaces, import tools, debug menus, content validators, and all the other internal utilities that players will probably never see. Those tools still require care, of course. Calling the work unskilled would be unfair to the programmers who specialize in building them. But from the perspective of a solo game creator, they can become expensive distractions from the work that only the creator can meaningfully direct. Notch has a particular vision for the game's mechanics, atmosphere, and structure. His time may be better spent deciding how its dungeon generation works, how its cursed items interact, and what makes its combat interesting, not spending 3 evenings fighting with the resizing behavior of a utility window. That is where AI can help. Let the machine draft the boilerplate code. Let it assemble an ugly first version of the editor. Let it generate repetitive property panels, file loading functions, and basic interface logic. Then have an experienced human inspect it, correct it, and connect it to the rest of the project. That does not make the game AI-generated. It means the developer used a power tool. The part of Notch's statement that bothers me is not that he is trying AI. It is that he apparently feels obligated to begin by assuring everyone that he still enjoys programming. Not because I don't like to do programming. Why does that need to be said? Using an automation tool does not mean you hate your craft. A programmer who uses an autocomplete system does not hate typing. A musician who uses a digital audio workstation does not hate music. A digital illustrator who uses layers does not hate painting. A game developer who uses procedural generation does not hate level design. Tools exist because creators have finite time. That defensive explanation demonstrates how poisoned this conversation has become. People are expected to publicly justify using a productivity tool before they are even allowed to discuss what they want to make with it. And Notch is not some beginner hoping that a chatbot will secretly turn him into a programmer overnight. This is the person who originally developed Minecraft. Whether you like him personally or not, he has already demonstrated that he understands game programming and iterative design. If anyone is in a position to experiment responsibly with generated code, it is an experienced developer who can recognize when that code is complete nonsense. The response from other programmers has also been interesting. Rather than attacking him, many AI-assisted developers seem genuinely eager to offer recommendations, explain different workflows, and warn him about the limitations. That is good. It is much more constructive than turning his change of mind into a permanent humiliation ritual. Yes, I am going to laugh at the timing. You cannot publicly say, reject AI, and then immediately ask the vibe coders for help without receiving at least a little teasing. But changing your mind after encountering new circumstances is not a moral failure. In fact, I wish more people would do it. The healthier response is, welcome aboard. Here is what works, here is what does not, and here is how to avoid destroying your codebase. I am curious to see what this means for levers and chests. The game has been presented as a dungeon-crawling roguelike or roguelite, with cursed items and deliberately broken combinations among its intended ideas. Notch has been discussing versions of the project since 2024, and previews have described it as a retro first-person experience. That kind of game could benefit considerably from rapid tool creation. An editor that lets him construct rooms faster means more environments to test. A node visualizer could make complicated dungeon logic easier to understand. A quick prototype generator could let him test unusual item interactions before spending days implementing the polished version. The key word there is prototype. AI is especially useful when the question is not, can you produce the perfect final system? But rather, can you help me get a rough version running today so I can determine whether this idea is even fun? Notch has always been associated with rapid experimentation. Before Minecraft, he produced prototypes, participated in game development communities, and later created Minecraft during a 48-hour Ludum Dare competition. AI tools could amplify that part of his workflow. They cannot guarantee that levers and chests will become another Minecraft. Realistically, it probably will not. Minecraft was a once-in-a-generation combination of the right idea, the right execution, and the right historical moment. But a project does not have to revolutionize the entire industry to be worthwhile. It merely has to be interesting. And I am optimistic that allowing himself to automate some of the tedious work may help Notch finish more experiments, discard weak ideas more quickly, and focus his attention on the parts of the game that require his particular taste, especially considering the current state of Minecraft. But that is a discussion for another day. For now, I am curious to see whether this remains a small experiment or becomes a permanent part of his workflow. Maybe he tries one coding assistant, receives a pile of unusable spaghetti, and abandons the idea by Friday. That is possible. Or perhaps he discovers that the technology is neither the salvation of programming nor the destruction of human creativity. Perhaps it is simply useful. Either way, when Levers and Chests finally comes out, I would gladly play it here on the channel. I doubt it will transform gaming in the same way Minecraft did, but I would love to be proven wrong. So, welcome to AI-assisted development, Notch.